Welcome to Fruit of the Spirit, Week 7. We've spent the beginning of this year kind of stepping through Paul's letter to the Galatians and his list of fruit that he started off. Paul's an interesting guy. He's kind of redundant sometimes, and he uses that to emphasize a point. And he did that a lot in his letter to the Galatians. So these fruit of the Spirit, they kind of run together and they complement, and sometimes they're just lumped. And I know we've kind of hammered it in this whole time that it's the fruit of the Spirit, just one fruit, so you don't pick and choose which fruit you prefer. But for the sake of this illustration, imagine that they're all different. And we have like the cutie of love, and the bananas of joy, and the grapefruit of peace, and kiwis of patience because they take forever to peel. And then a lot of people would say that kindness and goodness are the pair of the fruit of the Spirit, because they're lumped together most of the time and they're preached on as a whole. And we're going to kind of see today that you kind of miss out on a little bit of the meaning whenever that happens. So let's read in Galatians the full list. Galatians 5:22 says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law." So like I said, kindness and goodness kind of go together. Gentleness kind of gets thrown in there too. Maybe kindness is gentle goodness. But Paul is very specific in a lot of these words. So if we just take the word goodness and we think about it, just offhand, whenever I think of good, I think of something that satisfies a desired quality. Whenever you talk about good food, you have this mental list that food matches up with. Or a good movie, you know what genre you like, your favorite actors, check those off, that's a good movie. Or the good life, don't have to worry about money, you're out on a yacht somewhere, we've met these criteria, and that's the good. I think Paul is taking a little bit more of a morality look at this, and it's very apparent in the scriptures before Galatians 5:22. In 19 through 21 it says, "It is obvious what kind of life develops out of trying to get your own way all the time. Repetitive loneliness, cheap sex, a stinking accumulation of mental and emotional garbage, frenzied and joyless grabs for happiness, trinket gods, magic show religion, paranoid loneliness, cutthroat competition, all-consuming yet never satisfied wants, a brutal temper, an impotence to love or be loved, divided homes and divided lives, small-minded and lopsided pursuits, the vicious habits of depersonalized everyone into a rival, uncontrolled and uncontrollable addiction, ugly parodies of community." I could go on. This isn't the first time I have warned you, If you use your freedom this way, you will not inherit God's kingdom. And then he goes into the fruit of the Spirit, which are to contrast this list of things that he says happen when you try to get your own way all the time. So we have this list, and when we try to get our own way, this is what's going to happen. And if we don't try to get our own way, then it would make sense that that doesn't happen, right? We have this list of don'ts, and if we're careful to make sure that we check off each of those, then that bad stuff's not going to happen. Terrible addictions and loneliness and things like that. Or that's the way it would appear. But let's look at how Jesus used the word goodness. There's it was a few decades earlier in Matthew 19:16 through 22. "Another day, a man stopped Jesus and asked, 'Teacher, "What good thing must I do to get eternal life?" Jesus said, "Why do you question me about what's good? God is the one who is good. If you want to enter the life of God, just do what he tells you." The man asked, "What in particular?" And Jesus said, "Don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't lie, honor your father and mother, love your neighbor as you do yourself." The young man said, "I've done all that, what's left?" "If you want to give it all you've got," Jesus replied, "go sell your possessions, give everything to the poor, all your wealth will then be in heaven, then come follow me." That was the last thing that young man expected to hear, and so, crestfallen, he walked away. He was holding on tight to a lot of things, and he couldn't bear it to let go. So that's a whole series in and of itself, the rich young ruler. And there's a lot of debate on his sincerity. He did leave pretty crushed, so it appears that he's not trying to set Jesus up when he asks, "What good things must I do to inherit the kingdom of God?" And what does Jesus say? You should know, right? What has God said in the past? There's this list of don'ts, right? Don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't. Even the honor thy father and thy mother part could be turned into a don't, right? Don't disrespect your parents. And that's just not enough, because the guy said, "Oh, I've already got that list. I've already started checking those things off. So what else?" And then Jesus says, "All right, take out your wallet." So he takes it out. "How much you got?" Well, he was a rich young ruler, so he had a lot more than I have, which is $2. And Jesus said, "Give that and everything else you have and everything that you've ever wanted away to the poor. If you really want to inherit this kingdom." So Jesus is making 2 points here. First off, and this is the first contrast between kindness and goodness. Good requires action. Kindness is a passive thing. It's very personal and intimate. But goodness can sometimes carry an edge. It does what needs to get done. And so it wasn't just good enough for him to check out all these don'ts. At some point, his belief had to take action. We see this same goodness in Jesus when he comes in to Jerusalem, hailed by the community. Then he walks to the temple and he drives out the money changers. It was the goodness in Jesus that caused him to act, to say, "This is not what my Father intended for this place to be." It was the goodness. So goodness doesn't sit around. Goodness finds something that needs to be done, and goodness gets it done. And it's not necessarily pretty, but it's good. Also, we see Jesus at the beginning kind of guiding this rich young ruler's idea of what good actually is. So the rich young ruler comes and says, "What good things must I do to inherit the kingdom?" Other accounts of the story say, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit the kingdom?" Which could have been just a greeting of the day, "Good teacher," or just a qualifier for a list of things, good things. And Jesus calls him out on it. He says, "Why are you calling me good?" Or, "Why do you ask about these good things? There is only one that's good, and that's the Father." So this goodness that we're pursuing as a fruit of the Spirit is not just a quality, but it's being like God, growing into what God is, His goodness. So let's take another step back, 1,300 years. We have this guy named Moses, and he's leading the Israelite people out of slavery in Egypt and into a land that God's promised them. And right off the bat, he leaves them alone for a second, and they screw up. They build a golden calf, and they're worshiping it when he comes down the mountain. And Moses, he loses it because he knows how disappointed God is. And he cracks the tablets that he was carrying with him, and he says, all right, who's on God's side? The Levites stand up and they kill thousands of people because the Israelites weren't happy with the way things were going. Even though they had just been led out of slavery, carrying gold and treasures with them. They so quickly turned on God and said, well, let's just make a trinket. That's a lot easier to set up, and we know where that is. It's comfortable. So these Levites, they step up, and for the Lord, they kill thousands of people. And there's a little bit of a shock, maybe a little bit of awkwardness after that. Like, all right, what's going to happen now? A lot of us are dead. Are we just going to keep going? And we pick up in Exodus 33, Moses praying to God. Moses said to him, if your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. How will anyone know that you are pleased with me and with your people unless you go with us? What else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth? And the Lord said to Moses, I will do the very thing you ask, because I am pleased with you, and I know you by name. Then Moses said, and now show me your glory. And the Lord said, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. So Moses asked to see God's glory, and God says, I'm going to show you exactly what you asked for. I'm going to show you my goodness. Because goodness is the glory of God. Like Jesus said, no one is good but the Father. It's this defining quality of God. And so this goodness that we're striving after, this desire for purity and righteousness and generosity, it's a desire to be like God. And so we have this whole scenario where God says, I'm going to show you my glory, but I can't show you my glory. So you're going to find a cave, I'm going to cover the hole, and whenever I get by, you get to see my back. Because you can't look me in the face, it's just too much. So we have this interaction between God and man. Moses steps into this cave, God walks by, and we pick up in Exodus 34, 6 through 7. And he passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. And we wish it stopped there, yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sins of the fathers to the third and fourth generation. That's heavy. That's heavy. And that's our picture of goodness, right? God is showing his goodness, and it is mercy and grace and patience and forgiveness and love and justice and righteousness. It's powerful in its action, and it's just his back. I don't know if you guys have thought about it, but if I turned around and you looked at me from the back, hopefully you can tell I'm a guy. You might think I'm a little weird because there's a mullet thing going on and it's 2013. But for the most part, you could mistake me for anybody else, right? Because there's not a lot of information when you look at somebody from the back. And this is the picture of God's goodness. Just a fraction of what it really is. So he is goodness. He is good. And when we talk about good in the world, we can compare it to some standard that we've contrived, right? A good movie, or good food, or Brian's a good guy. When it comes down to it, there is a standard that's always been. There is a standard for love and mercy and justice that's always been. And the craziest part about it is the goodness is God. It's the biggest part of his character, his goodness. And yet it's the thing that the world attacks the most. I'm sure you guys have heard questions like this. Like, how can God allow such evil in the world if he's a good God? Or, how can a God who is good look away while so many are suffering and dying? It was questions like these that little teenage C.S. Lewis asked. And it's what ultimately led him away from the Christian environment at home into a life where he denied the existence of God. I don't know if you guys are familiar with C.S. Lewis's story, but it's really amazing how God grabbed a hold of him. And he fought it the whole time. He talks about his kind of salvation moment, kicking and screaming to the cross. Anyway, so he looks back and he thinks about this argument that he was making, and the thing that landed the most with him was things were so bad off to be set into motion by a just God. How would a just God set off this world that's just so messed up? And he gives this in a radio show that eventually became the book Mere Christianity. My argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? If the whole show was bad and senseless from A to Z, so to speak, why did I, who was supposed to be part of the show, find myself in such a violent reaction against it? Of course, I could have given up my idea of justice by saying it was nothing but a private idea of my own, but if I did that, then my argument against God collapsed too. The argument depends on saying that the world was really unjust, not simply that it did not happen to please my fancies. Thus, in the very act of trying to prove that God did not exist, in other words, that the whole of reality was senseless, I found I was forced to assume that one part of reality, namely my idea of justice, was full of sense. If the whole universe has no meaning, we should never have found out that it has no meaning. Just as if there were no light in the universe, and therefore no creatures with eyes, we should never have known it was dark. Dark would be without meaning. And so what C.S. Lewis is saying is, when we say this world is messed up, when we talk about the hurt and the evil and the wickedness that happens, we're measuring that against his goodness. We have no way of saying the world's messed up if we don't have some perfection to look at, some perfect good. So, this perfect good, well, what did he have in mind? I mean, hopefully it wasn't this messed up world, right? So we take another step back, this time about 2,300 years, and we make it to the beginning of the Bible. And we have this God who is, in his essence, good, creating the universe. And as he creates it, the light, as he creates the sun, moon, and stars, and the land, and the water, he says, this is good. And when he creates the fish and the birds and the animals, it's good. And he takes special care when he creates man. And I love this, we talked about it last week. He reaches down and picks up some dust. I like how Brian put it in downtown. God got his hands dirty. And he breathed into that dust some of his goodness. And we were created. And he said, this is very good. So we have Adam, who is good, sitting in the middle of a good garden, partaking in the goodness of God, uninhibited. And God sends him Eve because man shouldn't be alone. We all know that. We'd lose too much. So Adam and Eve in this garden of goodness, and God puts a tree right in the middle, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It was probably larger than this. And Adam and Eve, in their goodness, in the middle of the good garden, have one good rule. Don't eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. No reason why. And there's a lot of speculation in theology that goes into the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I think the easiest explanation is they're sitting in a garden of good. They have no idea what evil is. They have no idea what it feels like to have good gone. A complete and total absence of everything they've ever known and everything they were meant to know. And what does man do? We screw it up. We break the one rule that we were given in this garden of goodness, and we take the fruit and we eat it, and the goodness is gone. We get to experience a life of turmoil with an absence of goodness, an absence of mercy and generosity and charity and kindness and love. And whose fault is it? It's our fault. We can't point any fingers. Why did God make this world so bad? It's our hands that are dirty. And yet, we know we've screwed it up and we try to fix it. But we don't have any goodness. You can't fill a goodness void if you don't have any goodness. But you'll hear people say, I know where the goodness is. Come follow these rituals and you'll experience the goodness. Or, I know where the goodness is. Come up to this mountain and that's where the goodness is. And we'll experience goodness together. And a lot of the times it looks like those people know what they're doing. But they don't. They're stumbling through an absence of goodness, trying to grasp hold of what is good, and they're missing the mark. It reminds me of something I read online just recently. In Spain, there's a cathedral, and in this cathedral, there's a painting of Jesus that's about 120 years old. That was the original, and after 120 years, it looks kind of janky. And so, this 81-year-old grandma decided that she was going to take it upon herself to return the goodness to this painting. She was not a painter. She had no idea what she was doing. But she said, I'll give it a go because it's better than nothing. And she ruined it. That's what we have now. She didn't have anybody's permission. She just did it. And the crazy thing is, this old lady, she's in Spain. She could have been mistaken for a painter. I'm sure if I was in that cathedral, I would be like, that painter is painting the wall. I'm sure she went out and bought some nice paintbrushes and had some nice paints. But when it came down to it, she didn't have the skills that were necessary to get the job done. And she ruined it. And we laugh because this is so silly, but we do the same thing with God. We try to build up this facade and act like we know what we're talking about, what it looks like to experience His goodness, and yet it's just something that we've made up to make ourselves feel better, make somebody else feel better. In her defense, she claims that she wasn't finished yet. So, maybe down the way it would have looked better. So anyway, in the end, the people around us might think we know what's going on for a while, but that falls apart. pretty quickly. And we're all at the same place. We're all sitting in this absence of goodness. Paul talks about it in his letter to the Romans, chapter 7. I realize that I don't have what it takes. I can will it, but I can't do it. I decide to do good, but I don't really do it. I decide not to do bad, but then I do it anyway. My decisions, such as they are, don't result in actions. Something has gone wrong deep within me and gets the better of me every time. It's our humanity. A long time ago, our humanity fell away from goodness. And so we don't have the good inside of us that it takes to make the right decisions. And we can strive for that, and we can want it, but when it comes down to it, we don't cut it. But luckily, God is good. And like I said earlier, good is not passive. Good does not just sit back. Good takes action. And so God, in His goodness, took action with us. And He sent His Son to die. And that made all the difference. Now we have a different option. Paul picks it up in the chapter before, in chapter 6. For we know that our old self was crucified with Him so that the body of sin might be done away with, that we should no longer be slaves to sin, because anyone who has died has been freed from sin. Now if we die with Christ, we believe that we will also live with Him. So it's not just us anymore, but we have goodness inside of us. It's not us just trying, but it's the good inside of us that bears the fruit. Now, I don't want to make it sound like this is just a you get saved and you're a better person type of thing. Fruit takes cultivating. You have to want it. You have to plant the right seeds. We don't make it grow, but we can help it grow. And ultimately, that's what we have to do. We have to decide to step forward in goodness and be good to those in the world and be good to those in the church and not be just looking out for ourselves anymore. Jesus talks about it in the Sermon on the Mount. He talks about this new kingdom. It's about loving your enemies and doing good to those who hate you, blessing those who curse you, and praying for the people who mistreat you. Not judging, not hating, not condemning. And it's because our goodness takes action. In Luke 6, no good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. People do not pick figs from thorn bushes or grapes from briars. The good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and the evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For out of the overflow of the heart, his mouth speaks. So we decide to fill our hearts with goodness. And thankfully, Jesus is the means to do that. Still takes a choice, but then we get to let go. And that's what we're called to do. We're part of this new kingdom, this good news that there's somebody else in charge now. You don't have to listen to your flesh. You don't have to do the stuff you don't want to do, like Paul was talking about. The world sees it. Matthew 5:14-16. Again, Sermon on the Mount. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. So we aren't perfect, but we're called to good deeds. And we're messed up, and we make the wrong choices, but we're pushing ahead. There's a finish in sight, a goodness that we're striving for, a goodness that all of creation feels. It says groans for. Because we don't want to be where we are right now. I don't want to stay messed up like this. I don't want to always make mistakes and always do the things that I don't want to do. So I look ahead to the goal, the prize. Like Paul says in Philippians, he who has begun a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Jesus Christ. So we're moving forward toward the finish line. And all we're called to do is let's just be good. Let the goodness permeate us. Generosity, charity, love, service, so that other people can see and join this new kingdom and will multiply. The great reformer Martin Luther puts it this way: this life, therefore, is not righteousness, but growth in righteousness. Not health, but healing. Not being, but becoming. Not rest, but exercise. We are not yet what we shall be, but we are growing toward it. The process is not yet finished, but it is going on. This is not the end, but it is the road. All does not yet gleam in glory, but all is being purified. He's making everything new. He's taking everything that's messed up and rotten, and he's making it new. A little girl was walking with her mom out to the car one Sunday after church. And she told her mom that day in school, the teacher, that day in Sunday school, the teacher had told them about how big God is. That he's huge, and that he created the universe with his words, and he's everywhere, and he fills it up. And the little girl wanted to know, Mom, is God really that big? And Mom said, yeah, he really is that big. Maybe even bigger. And the little girl said, well, and our Sunday school teacher also told us that he wants to come and live in our hearts. He wants to be inside of us and tell us what to do. Is that true? And Mom said, yeah, that's true too. He wants to live inside you. He wants to rule your life. And the little girl said, with him being so big and wanting to live inside of me, won't he show through? That's what we want. We want to be so filled up that he shows through. Let's pray.